Hey everyone, settle in. Tonight we're opening the creaking pantry door on one of the bleakest chapters in medieval Europe, the Great Famine of 1315 to 17, when rain wouldn't quit, crops drowned, and peasants stared at empty fields that looked more like murky ponds than bread baskets. Before we step into that mud-slicked nightmare, hit the like button if gloomy history helps you sleep, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and whether it's supper time, midnight snack time, or I really should have been asleep 3 hours ago time. Subscribing means you never miss another slow burn dive into humanity's worst meal plans. Okay, dim the lights, maybe grab a slice of very modern, non-moldy toast, and imagine you're a smallholder in early spring 1315. Last year's grain bin is a sad, hollow box. The sky is the color of dirty wool. You can smell rot in the earth. And every rumor you hear in the marketplace sounds like the same terrible sermon. The barley's black, the rye rusted, the oats, don't ask. Medieval peasants lived by a tight agricultural rhythm carved into their bones. Plow in February, sow in March, pray for sun in April, harvest in August, feast after Michaelmas, chew salted leftovers all winter, repeat. But in 1315, the heavens shrug and open. Relentless cold rain floods fields from Ireland to Poland. Hillside grains germinate but then suffocate, stalks turning yellow like sickly reeds. Roads turn to slush rivers. Mills stop because water wheels are either smashed by swollen streams or jammed with debris. Suddenly, that rhythm is noise, and you're tapping your foot to find the beat, and there isn't one. So what do you eat when last autumn's storehouse is empty and the new crop is composting in place? You improvise with desperation's cookbook. Recipes nobody saves on parchment because nobody wants to remember them. Peasants knew forests better than we do. Acorns are bitter. They're loaded with tannins that make your tongue feel like it's wearing a scratchy cloak. But if you leach them enough times in running water, smash them, and simmer them with whatever milk hasn't soured, you get a gray sludge that barely passes as porridge. Add shredded inner bark, yes, literal tree bark, from young birch or pine. Ground fine, mixed with a fistful of rye chaff, baked on a hearthstone, it becomes bark bread. It fills the stomach the way crumpled rags fill a pillowcase, lumpy, inadequate, but technically something. While you chew, you feel the tannic fuzz coat your teeth. You hear your kid ask if there'll be real bread this year. You lie and say, when St. Martin blows away the clouds. That's weeks off, maybe months, maybe never. Midday, you'd normally eat trenchers. Wheat slabs soaked with stew. But wheat is a ghost now. So you wade into waterlogged meadows and yank out whatever has green bits. Chickweed, nettle tops, sorrel, goosegrass, even the slimy bulbs of yellow flag irises. You boil them into a swampy soup thickened with a handful of mash, the dust left in the bottom of last year's grain sacks. Sometimes you trap frogs, slice them open, and pretend the legs are chicken wings. Rumors spread that frogs and snails might carry water fever, but hunger shouts louder than rumors. Every barn had a shrine to future hope, sacks of seed wheat and barley strictly off limits. Eating it means gambling with next season's sowing. But as 1315 drags into July and the rainfall feels biblical, villagers vote with growling stomachs. They crack open the seed store. Women grind it with tears in their eyes. The flour smells like betrayal. Warm, hopeful, utterly wrong. When that bread bakes, it feels heavier in the hand because it weighs down the conscience too. Fathers promise to re-sow somehow, maybe borrow seed, maybe pray up a miracle. Deep down, everyone knows you just mortgaged spring. Livestock is life savings on 4 hooves, but hay is soaked and beasts stand shivering in muddy paddocks. By October, many drop dead of cold or hoof rot. Some owners bleed horses or cattle the way you'd tap a maple. Nick the jugular, collect a bowl of blood, then plug the wound with cobwebs and mud so the animal survives another week. Stirred with oats if you still own oats, and fat if the cow still has any, the blood cooks into a black custard you swallow while trying not to gag on the metallic aftertaste. You feel the warmth spread in your belly. You also feel the pulse of the starving animal tied up outside, and it feels disturbingly synchronized with yours. Chroniclers like the Monk of St. Denis wrote that travelers stumbled upon frenzied parents murdering children or grave robbers cooking corpses. Were these exaggerations? Maybe. But Bishop Guillaume of Chartres preached that some Christians feed the bodies of the dead to their children. Real or rumor, the fear alone changes you. You eye strangers on the road not as souls, but as potential thieves, or worse, potential meals. Trust curdles faster than milk. All this happens while wheat prices spike to 6 times the norm. City magistrates in Bruges fine bakers for shrinking loaves. Rural markets collapse because nobody has surplus to sell. Coins vanish, barter rules. You trade a wool cloak for a sack of dried peas that look half-eaten by weevils. You tell yourself you'll patch the cloak hole with humility. Winter is coming, and humility is terrible insulation. Malnutrition opens doors for dysentery, ergot poisoning, tuberculosis. Children's bellies swell, not from food, but from fluid retention. Joints ache, teeth loosen. Parish priests report funerals stacked morning to dusk. Church bells ring so often they become background noise, white noise for an age of black bread. But humans are annoyingly stubborn. Someone brews famine beer from fermented pea pods. It's terrible, but it forgets your name after 3 cups. Midwives still deliver babies, humming lullabies nobody remembers writing. A wandering minstrel trades a song for a bowl of nettle stew. His tune about a sunlit harvest 9 years ago makes everyone cry, which almost feels like therapy. At night, by the hearth, you tell ghost stories about will-o'-the-wisps leading the righteous to hidden grain caches. Maybe, tomorrow, you'll follow a flicker in the bog, just in case. By spring 1316, cold rain again. Chroniclers call it salt moisture because it stings the eyes like tears. Fields sprout, then drown. More bark bread, more seed eating. In 1317, the clouds finally break, but the soil is exhausted, and so are you. Recovery takes years. Some regions never restock their herds. But the memory endures, seared into peasant folklore. Don't trust a warm April. Store double, pray harder. And that, friends, is the table we'll sit at for the next 6 parts. We'll break down how monasteries rationed fish, how nobles fared. Spoiler, better, but not great. How thieves formed bread gangs, and how one battered generation limped its way to the first glimmer of plenty. You trudge along a flooded cart track toward the local Benedictine abbey because rumor says the brothers still have stores. Abbey walls loom like a promise wrapped in stone. Charity lives inside, at least on parchment. Monks meet you in the outer yard, holding iron-bound tallies. They've become human abacuses, counting peas and bowls, weighing barley to the dram. Charity has an exchange rate now. 1 psalm per ladle of gruel, 3 Hail Marys per heel of brown bread. Inside the frater, steam rises from pots of pitch porridge, a sludge of ground beans, turnips, and the last shred of smoked eel scraped from the spine. The brothers bless the bowl and apologize with their eyes, even while their mouths recite Latin. They too are shrinking inside wool habits that once fit. But the abbey holds an ace. Fish ponds. Carp, pike, eels, stagnant, muddy, yet alive. On fleshless days, the monks would normally savor them in onion sauce. Now, ponds are ration banks. Each net haul is cataloged, salted on planks, and sealed behind locked doors. Word spreads, and soon starving layfolk, their faith bent by hunger, creep at night with sacks and crude hooks. The monks hire watchmen. Famine turns fish into silver. You score a single smoked eel, its eyes sunken like 2 black beads, in exchange for promising to weed the cloister garden for a week. You can already feel blight living in that soil, but a contract's a contract. You tuck the eel in your cloak and hurry home through mist that smells of wet straw and rot. You can't help gawking at the manor house you pass. Last year, its windows glowed each night with a feast day shine. Today, only 1 upstairs chamber flickers. Inside, the Lord spreads trenches thinner than before, his cellar pacing like an anxious accountant. Salted venison is down to its final barrel. The falcons haven't caught game in weeks because storms ground them. The noble's daughter, who once complained if her feast dress smelled faintly of hearth smoke, now chews bean bread with a stiff jaw, trying to pretend it tastes like wheat. Yet, the manor still exerts gravity. Desperate tenants orbit it, hoping crumbs fall. The Lord issues scrips, vouchers promising payment in grain once the harvest returns. They stack like leaves, but spend like wishes. Peasants sign anyway. Starvation is the most persuasive notary. Servants whisper that last week the kitchens boiled the bones of draft horses after nightfall, lest visiting squires notice. Horse soup is an open secret now, ladled into pewter bowls and called black broth to lend it a Spartan glamour. If you're lucky and unlucky, you might taste it should you get conscripted to repair the Lord's drowned mill race. Threadbare lawmen patrol muddy roads in twos because lone sheriffs disappear. Bread gangs, roving bands of displaced farmhands, haunt crossroads. They carry flails, not swords, but hunger wields them like steel. They don't set out to murder, they set out to eat. Yet hunger plus panic equals violence. When they ambush a grain cart, one panicked horse lashes out. A wheel snaps, a driver falls, a skull cracks. Now the gang owns flour and guilt. Law decrees hanging, but there's no time to build gallows. Corpses would attract dogs, and worse, hungry people. Village reeves improvise punishments. Offenders stand in the stocks in pouring rain for 3 days, forced to recite the Lord's Prayer while receiving no bread at all. It's supposed to be poetic justice, Mostly it's theater, an act to distract from the bigger crime of an Earth that forgot to feed its children. You learn to recognize gang territory, ash from last night's campfire, footprints of 40 men who couldn't even afford shoes. You step lightly, clutch your eel, and pray they've moved toward richer pickings. When bodies shrink, ailments swell. Village wise women grind foxglove to slow pounding hearts, but proper dosage is guesswork. It either steadies the beat or stops it. Parish priests attempt mass exorcisms of pestilential air. They process through hamlets with relics, bone splinters supposed to be Saint Sebastian's arrowhead, believing it can shoo away famine mists. Skeptics murmur that the relic looks too fresh, maybe carved from last year's pig bone, but nobody challenges publicly. Hope is brittle. Traveling healers see opportunity. One sells a tonic of stale ale mixed with boiled willow bark, claiming it waters the hunger so it flowers into strength. Another hawks a leather pouch stuffed with goose feathers and says it wards off belly cramps if worn next to skin. You trade him a pair of wool mittens for it because your child's cramps make you desperate. That night, the child still whimpers, but you tell yourself the whimpers are quieter, so perhaps it works. Or perhaps you just need the story to. Monks in distant Paris debate whether mass confession and fasting could lift God's punishment. One scholar jokes bitterly, "If fasting could save us, we'd all be saints by now." The joke circles Europe like a blackbird and lands in your village months later, stripped of humor, leaving only feathered despair. By midsummer 1316, some clever devils perfect charcoal bread. Mix half a sack of ground briquette with half a sack of rye, and you double the loaves. It turns tongues gray and passes through undigested, but for the first seconds of chewing, you taste something, and that something feels like victory. Poor folk eat it willingly, desperate bakers stretch dwindling inventory, constables know but look away. There simply isn't enough jail space to punish creativity. You attempt a loaf. The dough stains your fingernails midnight. You bake it on a hot stone, and the crust looks like a meteorite fallen to earth. Your youngest nibbles, grimaces, but keeps gnawing. You watch the crumbs fall like pepper and feel guilty, because tomorrow there may be no pepper, only stones. Late August. A rumor blows in. Some hillside farms in the Rhineland have barley heads standing tall. People load carts, trek hundreds of miles, and on arrival find fields stunted or already confiscated by local lords. Yet the rumor itself nourishes. Hope is a psychological calorie. You consider leaving, but your spouse reminds you that travel burns energy you don't have. You stay. Still, wanderers cross your village daily. A ragged couple from Flanders trades Flemish linen, once worth silver, for 2 handfuls of oats. A Breton sailor far inland sells shell beads for nettle soup. He laughs that daisies here look the same as by the sea, but the laughter sounds hollow, like a cracked bell. Finally, in May 1317, the sun shows up like an apologetic relative who missed 2 funerals. Fields dry, barley sprouts. Villagers kneel, touching green shoots as if they're silk. But ground once waterlogged is leached of nutrients. Weeds compete. Yields will be half even in the best case. People calculate. If we harvest 1/4 of our old normal and mouths are fewer because of burials, does that equal stability? No, because seed grain's gone. Borrowing begins. Interest is measured in sacks of flour due next year. A usurer from the nearest town writes contracts so tight you can feel them throttling the future. Yet there's cheering at the first loaf of honest bread. It smells yeasty, not tannic. It is heavy, not with guilt, but with real calories. You cry because you forgot bread could smell like dawn instead of doom. When children play again, their games are different. No longer knights and dragons. Now they play beggar and reeve. One child crouching with a bowl, another measuring imaginary grain. Songs shift lyrics. Where once they praised golden wheat, now they warn, "Don't eat tomorrow today." Famine rebrands folklore. Parents raise toddlers on cautionary tales of the rain demon and the seed thief, personifications of weather and desperation, hoping kids will grow into hoarders of prudence. Monks update chronicles. Anno Domini 1317. Rains abated. Deo gratias. They don't record how many died. Parchment costs silver. But they underline in red ink this conclusion: God's mercy was delayed, not denied. You read that later and wonder if delay can break a soul as completely as denial. You decide to believe in mercy anyway. Cynicism weighs as much as sorrow, but fills no stomach. Years later, people will call it the Little Famine, small only in hindsight, overshadowed by the Black Death. But for your generation, it's the yardstick. Every drizzle becomes suspect. Every dark cloud is a ghost. You never throw away crusts again. You store beans in clay jars sealed with wax. When your grandchild spits out kale, you tell him about bark bread. He rolls his eyes. He has never met a forest you can eat. You smile, but keep storing beans. And that, night wanderers, is where we leave the mud-slicked threshold of survival and step toward cautious recovery. In the next episode, we'll follow the grain caravans, meet the creditors, both human and divine, and discover how a battered Europe laid the tracks for something we'll later call resilience. The wagons halt outside the manor's granary, two thick-walled stone barns that smell of dust and rat droppings. Contract scripts fly across a makeshift table. Terms, weights, tariffs, the Lord's tithe, the church's tenth, the crown's levy, the captain's road fee. Each nibble nicks away at the mountain of rye until it's a respectable hillock. The notary's quill squeaks louder than the peasants' stomachs. You stand with your neighbors in a line that curls like a serpent around the yard. One by one, families step forward to trade coin, cloth, or future labor for a measure of grain. The steward weighs each purchase on iron scales, stones clacking like judges' gavels. Several people hand over wedding goblets, silver buckles, heirloom knives. Value is a fluid thing. Today, it flows toward bellies. When your turn comes, the steward lifts your barter, 2 homespun blankets you've kept dry all summer. He frowns at the thin weave, but nods. A scoop of rye slides into your sack, heavy enough to bow your shoulder. You exhale, and for an instant, the night frost smells less like metal and more like morning porridge. But behind you, a hunched old woman offers 3 hen's eggs, hairline cracked from the jostling. The steward shakes his head. She pleads. He wavers. The merchant at the table barks about time. In the end, she leaves empty-handed, whispering prayers that sound suspiciously like curses. Such is the etiquette of desperation. Polite until it isn't, orderly until the scales tip. Before dawn even bleeds into the horizon, rumors outrun the convoy. Some say that 20 miles north, a rival baron plans an ambush, hungry for tolls. Others insist the king's reeves will requisition half the load for the army, bulking on the Scottish border. The merchants, seasoned cart captains with scars like rough cartography, know the greatest thieves ride horses, not high roads. Money lenders. 7 days after the convoy, parchment bandits arrive. Town factors wielding ledgers the size of tombstones. They tally every grain barrel, then present the Lord with a neat column of debts. License fees for unloading at his domain. Arrears on last year's salt levy. Interest on the manor's war contribution. The final sum is a small fortune. The Lord haggles, loses, and signs. He must recoup somewhere. Guess where? Tenants' rents. That night, the village reeve posts new dues on the church door. Groans echo like ghosts leaving. Some tenants pack what little they have and depart under the stars, hoping a different fief will charge less sin. You stay, rooted more by exhaustion than loyalty, clutching your sack of grain like a newborn. Inside your hut, the hearth is cold. Fuel became luxury after endless rain rotted wood piles. Now villagers practice strange bread chemistry. Flour, any, even rye, robbed of half its bran, is mixed with alderbark powder for body. The dough is kneaded atop a stone warmed in the coals. Then, in a trick borrowed from monastery kitchens, it's placed in an upturned iron pot whose rim is sealed with mud. Hot embers heap around the pot, and the mud gasket traps heat like a primitive Dutch oven. 20 minutes later, you crack open the pot and inhale a scent that's part char, part salvation. But the alchemy has another layer. You've leached the bark shreds in lime water overnight, hoping to drain the bitter tannins. Fail, and the loaf scours tongues raw. Succeed, and you've turned tree bark into calories. It's risk science, invented on an empty stomach. Some neighbors try frosting bread against the last frosts of winter. They set dough outside at night to freeze the water crystals, then slowly thaw it next day. The ice fractures the starch, they claim, making the loaf lighter. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the dough transforms into a gray, spongy mass birds won't touch. You make a mental note to ask the miller, once mills run again, whether grain remembers seasons the way people do. Famine rarely walks alone. Pestilence clings to its sleeve. In the spring thaw, murk-colored water pools beneath floorboards. Rats celebrate. Fleas hold court. A fever nobody can name sweeps through 3 cottages in a week. Victims sweat, then shiver, then speak nonsense about summer snow before falling silent forever. The priest, already hoarse from so many burials, now adds a new Latin phrase to the funeral rota. Miserere in tempore fame et pestis. Have mercy in time of hunger and plague. Grave diggers tap stones for shallower plots. The soil is still hard, the corpses many. They line graves with straw so bodies won't freeze to the walls of earth. Old customs falter. Once, the village rang bells every time a soul passed. Now, silence saves strength. Mourners weep softly to conserve breath. You help shovel dirt because the widow offered you a bowl of leeks and broth. Luxury thick as velvet. Still, the parish priest tries one last charm. He orders a penitential procession, barefoot, around the grain fields newly sprouted. Every step must match a recited psalm. Blood and mud mingle between toes. Wet wind slaps hair against cheeks. Will it appease heaven? Unknown. But for one long circuit, people remember they endure together. By midsummer, 1318, grain yields, though slim, trickle into barns. But grains rot fast without salt. Salt, mined in brine pits far away, costs more than honey. So the village revives an older art, smoking. Wheat sheaves are hung over slow alder fires in a communal smokehouse, turning them golden brown and impervious to mold. The process perfumes the air with a scent like toasted nuts. For days, you find villagers inhaling deeply, eyes closed, drunk on the luxury of not smelling decay. To fund communal salt, the reeve levies a salvage tithe, one handful of grain per household. Some grumble, others point to smoking racks and shrug. Better a small sacrifice now than starving next snow. For once, civic math clicks. People pay. They have learned the price of withholding. Children born during the famine now toddle about, wobbling on matchstick legs. Midwives call them gaplings, after the gap in the harvest. Many suffer spring disease, scurvy from winters devoid of greens. Wise women crush nettles and goosegrass into a sour paste to smear on flatbread. Kids gag but heal. You sneak a taste and feel life spark behind your teeth. Games evolve again. Now gaplings play convoy, pulling carts made from ox skulls, negotiating imaginary tolls in pebble currency. If there's a lesson, it lodges silently. Scarcity shapes the rules before players learn them. Far away in Avignon, where the papacy glitters like a jewel on the Rhone, clerics pore over letters detailing Europe's hunger. They draft bulls urging princes to store grain, promising indulgences to those who donate bread to the poor. Some rulers comply, others see opportunity. Stockpile grain and prices soar. Commodity speculation is born on the bones of famine. King Edward II of England debates legislation limiting grain hoarding, but his barons scoff. Who will enforce? The king could, if he weren't busy quelling revolt. Power sways. Hunger carves fissures deeper than politics. Merchants in Lubeck finance massive cog ships to haul Baltic rye southward. They call it charity. They charge triple. Still, southern towns pay because empty stomachs outvote outrage. By 1319, the rain pattern finally resembles an ordinary bad joke instead of a cosmic punishment. Harvest numbers creep upward. Yet something odd happens. People store more than they eat. Barn lofts fill. Diets remain thin. It's as if trauma sprouted farmers into squirrels. Even the manor lord eats porridge 3 days a week to pad reserves. Feast culture slims. Lent cuisine becomes year-round austerity. Chronicles soon note fewer weddings during famine years. Dowries dried up. But when prosperity tiptoes back, marriage markets erupt. Relationships forged under hunger's shadow now seek legitimate blessing. The village green hosts week-long nuptials fueled by, imagine, actual wheat bread thick with honey. Children born next year will never taste charcoal loaves. You attend such a wedding and feel history tilt. Those who survived become carriers of caution. Whenever laughter peaks, someone quietly checks the sky for storm clouds. Remember those scripts tenants signed? Creditors arrive, parchment in hand. Families who can't repay in grain must surrender livestock. Some barter teenage sons into long-term labor with distant monasteries. A few flee at night, debts chasing like hounds. Local jurists establish famine courts to arbitrate the chaos. Verdicts range from lenient forgiveness to confiscation of cottages. One evening, you meet the steward in the alehouse. He confesses the Lord himself is deep in debt to Lombard bankers. Everyone, it seems, mortgaged tomorrow. An uneasy truce forms. If creditors seize everything, who will pay them next year? So they accept smaller installments, like vultures agreeing to ration carry-on. Late one afternoon, you climb a grassy ridge overlooking the valley. Autumn's sun paints the stubble fields bronze. You can trace the famine's story across that valley. Empty crofts where whole families perished, new barns built twice as tall, smoke-grey graves on the church knoll, and beyond the faint ribbon of the highway where grain wagons still creep, now half full but still guarded. A thought arrives. Survival is not triumph, it's tenancy. You pay rent to life in daily vigilance. Yet, birds quarrel over oat seeds in the stubble as if hunger were a rumor. Their fearless chirping makes you smile. Nature's oblivious optimism. You pocket a pebble from the ridge, smooth and cold. A reminder. Stone endures what flesh records. So ends tonight's chapter of Europe's coldest, wettest nightmare, at least on this side of the ridge. In the next segment, we'll descend into city walls where famine created new professions. Corpse searchers, rat butchers, and hope scribes who forged miracle certificates for a price. You won't want to miss the racket. If your eyelids droop heavier than a grain sack, yield to them. Let the crackle of imaginary rye loaves settle you into dreams. But if your mind still buzzes like a tavern full of rumors, help our modern village grow. Click subscribe, ring the bell, and share in the comments which makeshift famine recipe, bark bread, lime-washed nettles, or smoked grain you dare to try. I read every line while steeping my own nettle tea. Silk-hooded figures stalk the streets at dawn, each carrying a white stick tipped with brass. They knock on shutters in a code everyone understands. 1 rap, deliver us your dead. 2 raps, show us who coughs blood. The guild charter calls them quaesitores, but everyone else says corpse searcher. Once, parish beadles performed that duty, but too many died in the first pestilential wave. Now, widowers, failed apprentices, and at least one disgraced canon walk the beat for coppers. You trail a pair through a crooked lane where laundry lines droop like surrender flags. They pause at a buckled doorway. From within drifts the stench of sour milk and decay. A woman emerges, face hard as broom corn. She points to the house's rear, then swallows a sob. The searchers enter and soon return bearing a bundle on a ladder sled, cloth swaddling what used to be her husband. Formalities follow. She must pay a removal fee. 2 pfennigs if the corpse is fresh, 4 if advanced. Freshness is judged by fly hatchlings, not pity. She counts coins with trembling fingers. A signed parchment records the debt if she falls short. Interest compounds weekly. Death, always a certitude, now issues receipts. Afterward, neighbors creep from hiding to scavenge. A chipped ladle, a half loaf gone green but salvageable, a pair of boots minus soles. Grief dilutes quickly when want is strong. You feel guilty recording these details, yet you keep watching because history spares no one who looks away. Turn the corner into Fishmonger's Row, ironically rat-dominated since river halls shrank. Here, stalls of latticed wicker display rows of skinned rodents neatly trussed like miniature hares. A sign in charcoal letters proclaims, "Fat, marsh-grown ratte, cleaned, bled, singed, 6 for a denier." The rat butcher, sleeves rolled, guts another specimen with surgeon's grace. He salts the pelt to sell to hatters, fur fillers for winter caps. Nothing wasted. Why rats? They eat granary remnants humans deem too foul, converting filth back into meat. A grim closed-loop ecology. Customers queue. An old monk who mutters a reluctant blessing before paying. A pregnant woman bold enough to haggle. 2 stable boys seeking skins for slingshot practice. They'll trade the flesh to taverns for ale. A physician in a felt cap stops to lecture on rat benefit. High in warm humors, he claims, perfect for patients chilled by fever. You recall your own physician back home recommending nettle paste for scurvy. Medicine, too, learns new languages during famine, every dialect spoken in the accent of necessity. Yet the rat butcher's most lucrative sideline is plague insurance. For a silver pfennig, he'll show housewives how to lay cedar branches and vinegar-soaked rags across floor beams, supposedly to deter fleas. It's snake oil science, but fear outsells logic. You jot that lesson down for your own era. In crisis, the line between remedy and racket is a single heartbeat. Beyond the cathedral square squats a wooden kiosk hung with waxy parchment strips. Men and women press close, tracing letters with calloused fingers. The proprietor, ink-black stains up to his elbows, dips quill, asks each client the same triad: name, ailment, saint of preference. For a modest fee, he scripts indulgence petitions or miracle certificates, claiming that, say, Saint Radegund cured Birgitta's weeping sores at dawn of Michaelmas. Pilgrims then tuck these notes under pillows or into coffins, hoping to expedite healing or the soul's flight. You watch one widow trade her last brass button for a parchment smeared with vermilion seal. Her eyes glimmer like someone glimpsing spring fields through a slot in winter. Hope scribes thrive where official church channels bog down under paperwork and plague. They are unauthorized, occasionally jailed, yet always return. Supply meets demand. It occurs to you that the entire city is a ledger balancing hunger against ingenuity, suffering against side hustle. Even the cathedral monetizes misery, selling entry to relic viewings when they unbox a fragment of the true cross. Tickets cost 3 deniers, or 1 if you're skeletal enough to look contagious. They assume you'll die before paying balance.
There's a courtyard behind the Grey Sisters Hospice where cauldrons squat like iron planets around a fire the size of pennants. A rule enforces silence while waiting, less for piety than to keep quarrels from igniting. Hundreds shuffle, bowls in hand, eyes sunken to coin slot slivers. The soup itself is a medley of monastery leavings, carrot tops, eel heads, cabbage ribs, barley dust gleaned from empty sacks.
You volunteer for ladling, partly to learn, partly to warm numb fingers. The sisters teach a rhythm: bowl, dip, pour, bless. Every 10th serving, add extra barley for children or visibly pregnant women. An unspoken code decides who qualifies: sagging bellies, scabbed knees, bruises hidden under sleeves. Judgment at the speed of ladle. One afternoon, the Black Helm Guards arrive, city militia, demanding inspection. They claim rumor of wheat hoarding for soup thicker than the market will allow. The Mother Superior stands her ground, cites papal edict on charity. After tense whispers, the guards withdraw with 2 jars of broth as samples. Everyone exhales without speaking, and the ladles resume. You note how quickly lines between mercy and extortion blur in lean times. As you leave, a novice presses a sprig of thyme into your palm. "Chew it against infection," she murmurs. Medicine, miracle, or placebo? You tuck it behind your ear like a talisman. Smell guides you down a stairwell beneath a shuttered alehouse. Yeast, wood smoke, something illicit. Torches reveal an arched cellar packed with clandestine ovens. Illegal bakers, mostly women banned from the City Bakers Guild, knead dough using flour smuggled via river barges and ground at midnight in hand querns. Their bread sells before sunrise to poorer quarters at half guild price. Guildmasters call it sabotage. City Council calls it shadow grain, threatening lashings. Customers call it survival. A lookout whistles, 2 rising notes, and the bakers douse torches, scrape coals into ash boxes, scatter flour over footprints. You squeeze behind a barrel as patrol boots clack overhead. The silence feels thick enough to slice. When danger passes, a baker named Elsbeth hands you a still warm roll, crust shattering under thumb. You taste rebellion. Yeastier, sweeter than law-sanctioned loaves robbed of wheat germ for the Lord's table. You remember this taste years later whenever legislation claims to serve the common good. Before you climb out, Elsbeth says, tell no one. But history doesn't keep secrets. It trademarks them as folklore. You vow at least to tip her story into some future chronicle. At the city green stands a scaffold of fresh sawn oak, creaking under the weight of new rope coils. Public punishment became weekly entertainment once famine thinned other spectacles. Today's docket: 3 grain hoarders, 2 bread rioters, and a forger of tax receipts. The crowd is thick. Peddlers hawk sugared almonds, irony lost on no one. Children sit on fathers' shoulders, wide-eyed as if watching miracle plays. Officials read charges in Latin no one understands. But the blame is clear: greed that starved neighbors. A crier lists each prisoner's hoard: kernels, salt, dried lampreys. The mob hisses. Yet among them stand nobles who hoard more discreetly. Justice, like grain, is graded: coarse for peasants, fine for lords. After sentences, 2 hangings, 4 brandings, you meet a chronicker jotting details. Posterity should know, she says. You ask if posterity will care which mouths hunger minted criminals and which minted coins. She taps her quill against her lip. Ink can't ferment into bread, but it lasts longer. As the year ends, temperatures dive again, though not as murderous as 1316's legend. Yet panic blooms at first frost. Bakers widen loaves with sawdust. Brewers thin ale with river water. Thieves cut purses to buy a week of calories. City council debates closing gates to refugees from countryside parishes still barren. Some argue compassion, others fear plague. Final vote: refugees allowed, but only if they bring provable craft skills. Misery must pay entry. You revisit the hospice. The lines now curl twice around the courtyard. Silence rule cracks. Arguments erupt over who skipped queue. Sisters post novices with cudgels to enforce order. Charity occasionally bruises. On 12th night, nuns stage a feast of fools to lighten hearts. They crown a breaker boy as mock bishop, parade candles, serve crusts soaked in honeyed wine. Laughter tumbles through halls like thaw water. Even so, you notice how quickly merriment fades when candles gutter. Fear, too, is a draught. Once swallowed, it leaves thirst for more reassurance. Snow falls in quilt-square flakes. By hearthlight, you draft a letter. Never mind to whom. Perhaps just to tomorrow. You describe the corpse searcher's brass-tipped sticks, the rat butcher's algebra, the hope scribe's counterfeit miracles. You mention the time sprig now shriveled above your bunk, its scent a whisper. You sign the letter "Witness to Hungry Years," tuck it under a floorboard, unsure whether you want it found. Outside, bells toll Compline. The city exhales steam through chimney forests. Somewhere, a baby cries. A rat squeals from a trap. A monk recites matins prematurely because clocks froze last winter and no one trusts sun positions anymore. Time itself seems frost-nipped, lagging behind stars. A chamber opens ahead, walled in glazed green tiles that glint like beetle shells. 4 braziers blaze at the corners, each filled not with coal, but with heaped resinous herbs: rosemary, lavender, crushed juniper. The jailer calls this stretch the courtesy corridor. Torture, it seems, is staged like theater. The victim's senses are first flooded with pleasing scent to lull the mind, to make the next chambers reek of scorched horn and bile that much sharper. Perfume as psychological fulcrum. Copper pipes snake across the ceiling, venting fumes toward hidden flues. Somewhere above ground, perfumers labor to keep this corridor stocked. You imagine their workshop, apothecary jugs clinking, petals mounded on linen, unaware or pointedly unconcerned that their craft becomes prologue to screams. Commerce weaves through cruelty as silk threads through chainmail. At the corridor's center stands a pedestal supporting a polished brass bowl.
The jailer tilts it so candlelight reveals flecks like black pepper. Powdered lavender blossoms, he explains. We make prisoners inhale deeply. A custom from Provence, they say. Clears phlegm. Also teaches them that pleasant is transient. His tone is too casual. You sense rehearsed pride, as if offering a culinary tour. Every dungeon, you realize, markets its specialization. Beyond the scented corridor, the walls narrow again, then flare into a stone-ribbed rotunda. At the center, a single pillar supports a wooden wheel rigged with leather straps. Yet the room's true weapon is not visible: acoustics. A slightest whisper at the wheel is flung upward, ricochets along the dome, and flutters against gallery slits high overhead. There, unseen nobles once gathered, sipping spiced wine while eavesdropping on epics of pain. The victims below could never see their audience, only sense that every moan, every confession was carried effortlessly, magnified to those invisible judges. The jailer walks you to a faint outline on the floor where a body once writhed so fiercely the stone is polished smooth. When the wheel turns, he says, ligaments crack loud as snapped reeds. Nobles up top swore they could taste the sound in their teeth. He chuckles, a brief chitter that darts away before shame can catch it. You picture merchants and magistrates filing in after Vespers, treating the rotunda like a private theater. Tickets paid not in coin, but in political favor. Pause to consider. Fear, like grain, trades on markets. Kings stockpile it, bishops tax it, courtiers barter it behind arras curtains. The Whisper Vault is a clearinghouse, distributing terror through rumor, cheaper than soldiers. A wooden door whines open onto a scriptorium lit by two horn-paned lanterns. Here, clerks sit at slanted desks, notating each interrogation in tidy chancery hand. Quills scratch steadily, rhythm almost prayerful. A monk confessor, hood thrown back, pores over one fresh parchment. He beckons you, inviting you to read. The document begins with ornate initial Misericordia Domini, but swiftly slides into catalog of fractures, dislocations, burn patterns. Margins hold shorthand calculations. Apply rat cage, 3 mens. Limb extension, +4 turns. Subject fainted, aqua vita administered. You ask why such detail. The monk answers in a voice brittle as unbaked clay. Accountancy. Torture chambers bill the treasury for materials. Ropes fray, irons dull. Poppy tincture dwindles. Each confession must justify expense. If a man breaks under 2 turns of the rack, splendid, cost efficient. If it takes 7, auditors query methods. An age when quills measure suffering against budgets. Blood and ink poured into the same ledger. You wonder whether future bureaucrats will audit today's prisons with equal zeal, or whether digital spreadsheets will tidy away the scream marks. One clerk dips quill, murmurs that he prays every night for steady hand, lest miscounted numbers anger the paymasters. You picture his nightmares. Columns of digits chasing him down echoing corridors, demanding accuracy amid echoes of bone. Next, the jailer leads you into a classroom, a concept so absurd here you almost laugh.
until the candlelight reveals what's studied. 3 young men, eyes raw with sleeplessness, stand before a mannequin jointed like a human. They practice tourniquet placement, not tension, listening for the correct timbre of creak signaling tendon strain but not rupture. An older instructor, arms tattooed with scripture verses, corrects posture. Elbows locked, wrists loose, force travels cleaner. One apprentice remarks that real limbs twitch unpredictably. The instructor nods. That's why you mustn't flinch. Your calm is their dread. Pedagogy of cruelty. Repetition, feedback, professionalism. The instructor passes around an ivory gauge etched with notches. Pressure indicator, he explains. Too little, they boast. Too much, they die. No good to us. Find the arithmetic mean of agony. The students scribble figures on wax tablets. Your stomach tightens. Even misery is mathematicized. Training dummies, once filled by straw, now contain pig carcasses to mimic human heft. The stench rises. Apprentices dab vinegar beneath nostrils. One jokes they'll never crave bacon again. The others do not laugh. They know jokes here cost appetite. A low archway opens to a niche barely wider than a cupboard. Inside, benches line the wall, and candles burn before a single relic, a finger bone encased in crystal, said to belong to Saint Zita, patroness of servants. Prisoners with wealthy kin may purchase 5 minutes here before interrogation, an indulgence touted to grant fortitude. The going rate, 2 golden florins. For 3 florins, clerics will mutter personalized psalms. The jailer admits, with the shrug of someone long anesthetized, that half the fees drift mysteriously into the bishop's coffers, some into the torturer's ale fund. Mercy, like torment, finds its market price. You watch a trembling merchant's wife clutch the crystal reliquary, whispering bargains. Spare him a finger, spare him blasphemy, as though saintly bone were negotiator. When her allotted minutes expire, 2 guards peel her fingers away, leaving tear-wet prints on the glass. She walks out stumbling, faith bruised but not broken, currency spent, outcome pending. You pocket that image. Mercy tokens shining faintly between blood deals and sermon smoke. Even holiness wears receipts. Down a second stair, shallower for heavy loads, you reach the instrument vault. Wooden racks display arrays of implements, each tagged with linen labels as neat as herb garden markers. Here, thumb screws sorted by hand size. There, iron Spanish boots fitted with wedges for incremental crushing. A glass case holds tongue tearers that resemble silver sugar tongs if one ignores the barbs. Another shelf offers the Swedish drink, a funnel designed to drown a captive in brine. Your guide gestures proudly at a mechanical chair bristling with spikes. German workmanship, he says, tapping one thorn. Replaceable tips. See, they screw off for sharpening. You wonder how craftsmen pitched this design at guild meeting. Fellow smiths, diversification opportunity. One instrument stands apart. A polished wooden cradle shaped like a ship's hull. Interior lined with curved steel strips. The jailer explains it's the Cradle of Judas. Victim is straddled atop the peak. Ropes slowly lower so body weight bears down on the angle's edge. Spectators prefer this tool, he notes, because it produces little blood, easier to watch over dinner. You sense bile rising, but curiosity pins you. A macabre gravity holds witnesses as surely as rope binds prisoners. A dusty corner hides a device half dismantled, a metal violin with adjustable neck clamp. The jailer says musicians once tuned screams to particular notes for wealthy connoisseurs. Art and atrocity share workshop space. Suddenly, you are ushered into a refectory bright as any noble hall. Long oak table, pewtered dishes, roast fowl steaming. Interrogators dine here between sessions. Body needs fuel to exert pressure. The juxtaposition is deliberate. Warm light erases traces of work, granting psychological reset. They call it iron table etiquette. No mention of screams while bread is broken. Instead, chatter turns to horse races, market tariffs, the bishop's new choir boy with voice like spring water. You sit as guest. A senior questioner slides you a trencher, invites you to sample capon soaked in spiced wine. The meat tastes of guilt and cloves. He boasts that his team extracted 20 confessions this quarter with 0 excess fatalities. Efficiency praised like tournament victories. Yet beneath bravado flickers something else. Weariness, maybe? He massages his thumb joint, likely inflamed from twisting screws. When dessert arrives, honeyed figs imported at obscene cost, he waves it away, stomach evidently queasy. You realize torment taxes tormentor too. After lights out, perhaps he dreams of finger bones snapping like stylus reeds. The wheel turns both ways. Past the refectory, a barred door leads to an archive chamber lined with oaken chests. Inside each, parchment bundles sealed with wax. They contain final confessions never shown to judges, too fantastical or politically inconvenient, or simply redundant once earlier pages damn the accused. A custodian monk guards the keys. He spends nights copying select gems into a leather codex labeled Silenciarium. He admits he doesn't know why, lest they vanish unwept, perhaps. It strikes you. Somewhere, a future historian may unearth this codex and reconstruct lives crushed here, names otherwise lost. The monk shows you an entry about a miller's daughter who, under rack, confessed to bewitching wheat into chaff. Her words slur into nursery rhymes when joints popped. Another tells of a court jester who, between lashings, recited jokes so clever the torturer laughed until dismissed. Laughter, too, can be weapon. The record notes jester's tongue was removed shortly after. You close the chest gently, aware that each scroll is both tombstone and heartbeat. Returning upward, your candle guttering, you pass a side tunnel braced with timbers. The jailer explains it leads beyond city walls. Bodies unfit even for potter's fields are dumped there after nightfall. Wild dogs patrol the brush. Sometimes bones surface when river floods. Townsfolk whisper of ghost lights bobbing near the mouth, souls too tattered to ascend. Above ground, dusk spreads violet across turrets. The jailer locks the outer grate and pockets the keys with almost tender care. Business concluded, he asks, "Shall I fetch you a cordial?" calms the nerves. You decline, stepping into street air suddenly sweet compared to subterranean rot.
Behind you, torchlight flickers through arrow slits, as though the dungeon itself blinked goodbye. A left-hand door, oak darkened by centuries of steam, opens upon a cavernous vault dominated by a circular pit. At first glance, it seems an ordinary oubliette, a hole for throwing lives away. But your guide gestures to a series of wooden teeth jutting from the rim and explains that each tooth marks 1-minute increment. Inside the shaft, tiered stone ledges form spiral steps spiraling downward. What you can't see, what you only hear, sloshing softly, is the water that rises and falls with pulse-steady precision, controlled by sluice gates miles upriver. Imagine a prisoner suspended by a chain just long enough that water laps at the collarbone. Each hour, a sluice creaks. Water rises the height of 2 teeth. Heartbeats race, lungs tighten, confessions bubble forth. If the testimony pleases, the wheel reverses, water retreats, victim breathes again. Should the story falter, the river gives no mercy. The technique is called l'oubli mécanique, mechanized forgetting. More economical than manual labor, the jailer notes proudly. The river does most of the persuading, costs us only grease for gears. Your candle guttering in damp air, you stare at green reflections rippling on the pit's slick walls, and picture those reflections flickering across wide eyes, too afraid to blink. Dampness soaks your boots. The jailer warns that even spectators risk lung fever if they linger. Terror, you realize, makes its own weather. Chill, clammy as November, yet sweat trickles between your shoulder blades. From the oubliette, you descend a corkscrew stair that burrows into bedrock, straight into a vault filled with clay amphorae stacked like hive cells. This is the apothecary catacomb, where tonics are brewed to bend pain without quite breaking flesh. Shelves groan under jars of mandrake, henbane, ground stag antler, pulped leeches suspended in vinegar. You spot an unlabeled bottle containing what looks like liquid sunrise, golden, opalescent. The resident physicus smiles thinly. That, good traveler, is aqua lucida, distilled sunrise itself, or so the archbishop claims. In truth, it's a decoction of saffron, honey, and powdered pearls poured down a patient's throat to keep vocal cords supple through prolonged screams. Here cruelty masquerades as care. The physicus maintains meticulous records: dosage, pulse rate, decibel level of outcry. Larger shouts win favor. Loud victims inspire fear in guards, encouraging caution in the next round. Data becomes leverage. Torture modernizes beneath vaulted ribs of age-old stone. Pinned to a pillar hangs a parchment wheel, the zodiac of suffering. Under Capricorn, the note reads, "Bones brill, avoid leverage methods." Under Cancer, fluids plentiful, prefer water torments. Astrology and anatomy blend in cynical alchemy. You realize even stars are conscripted into this bureaucracy of agony, their constellations twisted into footnotes. One assistant mortars seeds in a basalt bowl, humming a hymn off-key. She tells you prisoners sometimes beg for these drafts. They promise oblivion quicker than recantation. Charity tangled with spite.
To grant the potion is to shorten torment, but also to rob the court of spectacle. Decisions pivot on politics invisible to the man on the rack. A corridor lined with goatskin drums leads to a chamber that looks impossibly like a music studio. Lutes lean in corners, organ pipes stretch toward a mold-flecked ceiling, and a wooden frame supports what appears to be a harp of human bones. Meet the soundsmiths, minstrels in service to intimidation. Their charge: craft auditory backdrops that prime captives' nerves before steel ever touches skin. One artisan demonstrates a dissonance wheel, spokes of varied length strung with gut strings, spun by foot pedal. As it whirs, notes clash into howls that stir goose flesh. Another musician strikes a metal plate over a hollow chamber. The echo mimics distant thunder, convincing prisoners the heavens themselves protest. Recorders chirp bird calls backward. Bells tuned to quarter tones evoke funeral processions just out of sight. Why such theatrics? Fear grows in darkness, but it sprouts faster when fertilized by suggestion. A captive hearing phantom chanting may suspect demons. Suspicion snowballs into confession, saving the torturer elbow grease. Efficiency again. Fewer broken tools, fewer broken staff. Yet art unwittingly preserves humanity. These musicians pour devotion into their craft, albeit warped. One luthier admits he sometimes steals an hour alone, plucking gentle ballads on his bone harp, the only lullabies the dungeon walls know. Even malevolence can't silence the impulse to make beauty. It lingers here like a seed seeking cracked pavement to bloom. Your next guide, lean, ink-smudged, wearing spectacles cracked at the bridge, ushers you into an antechamber lit by lanterns whose wicks resemble curled black feathers. Scrolls crowd every shelf, each stamped with red wax seashells. This is the Bureau of Reversals, where lawyers and clergy adjudicate petitions for mercy. Stacked on one desk, confessions retracted, pleas of innocence, letters from foreign princes offering ransoms. A scribe unfurls a document edged with gold thread, a duke's confession of treason delivered under moderate persuasion. Now the duke claims error, citing delirium. The scribe must calculate whether releasing him would cost the crown less coin than prolonged imprisonment. The formula sprawls across abacus beads: upkeep expenses, ransom potential, political loyalty coefficients. You watch beads click, each representing months of a human life. In a corner, two praetor monks debate the weight of perjury under pain versus perjury for profit. They reference Aquinas, then pivot to commodity prices for salt and alum. Everything folds into spreadsheets of the era, wax tablets scored until edges fray. You ask whether genuine innocence figures into equations. The bespectacled clerk shrugs. Truth is concept, cost is measurable. His quill returns to tallying. Here, then, is the dungeon's hidden engine. Not cruelty, but arithmetic. Steel instruments are loud, but ledgers decide who bleeds and who breakfasts under open sky. The jailer from earlier re-enters briefly to drop off a purse. Profits from last night's gallery attendance. Coins clink. Clerk notes them under auxiliary revenue. You think of stock markets centuries hence, trading futures on suffering. Perhaps they already exist. Above this calculus hall stretches a narrow passage whose walls are fitted with small grates, all barred, each opening onto cells no longer in active use. They call this stretch the antechamber of echoes. Visitors, and we by default, must traverse it to reach the exit stair. Through each grate, voices from earlier eras rise. They are not ghosts, though legend says otherwise. They are survivors, kept alive, half forgotten, for reference. The court may summon them to confirm that their torturers exercised prudence. Living evidence archived like dusty law books.
One voice, raspy, ancient, croaks a prayer for rain. Another recites a childhood rhyme in a dialect dead these 200 years. A third simply weeps whenever footsteps pass. Guards feed them gruel, change straw twice a month. Why not free them? The clerk explained. Release jeopardizes secrecy. Witnesses might speak. Better to let them fade here, while official records list them as deceased long ago.
Standing before one grate, candle trembling, you lock eyes with a woman whose age you cannot guess. She could be 40, could be 100. Her gaze holds neither accusation nor plea, only vacancy, a mirror reflecting all that passes and forgets. Your throat tightens. You want to speak comfort, but language falters where time collapses. To our watchers who've reached this point, breathe. Let the air in your room remind you you're not trapped behind iron lattice. If this moment unsettles, press like. Not for vanity, but to signal endurance, solidarity with those who witness unpleasant truths. Comment section is our refuge. Tell me which voice in the passage would echo longest in your memory. At corridor's end, a stout door reveals the Knight Marshal's office, a sanctum lined with hourglasses. Each glass tracks a prisoner's ordeal. Flip occurs whenever method changes. The Marshal documents everything on vellum scrolls bound with black ribbon. Temperature, moon phase, the exact ratio of barley to horsehair in flogging whips. He shows you his pride, a silent trumpet, a silver horn with muffled bell used to signal between chambers without waking upper city residents. One puff, felt as air shift rather than heard, summons physicus. 2 puffs request cleric. 3 reverse water wheels. The Marshal believes himself guardian of order. He polishes the trumpet nightly, claims noise management is courtesy to townsfolk. Pain should not disturb commerce, he states. His logic rings chilling but meticulous. If screams leak above ground, markets panic. Wheat prices soar. Rumor breeds revolt. Thus, controlling acoustics becomes political stabilizer. He invites you to flip an hourglass. Ritual for guests. Sand begins its descent. Somewhere, a prisoner's timeline adjusts to your hand. The responsibility hums through your bones. In that moment, you sense how tyranny's weight disperses. Grains falling one by one. Too light to notice until dune forms. Before final ascent, you detour into a low-beamed annex where a lone candlemaker toils. Her table glows with molten tallow kept liquid by chafing dishes. She molds tapers of varying lengths, 30-minute candles for routine patrol, 10-minute stubs for quick inspections,
2-hour torches for extended interrogations. She dips a wick, pauses, and confesses she marks special candles with hidden swirls. 1 loop means show mercy, 2 means he has a child, 3 she sang psalms sweetly. Guards seldom notice, but when they do, they sometimes soften a blow.
Resistance, then, flickers even here, disguised as artisan flourish. Light becomes a code, a plea. You wonder how many lives lengthened by mere minutes thanks to a swirl of wax. The candle maker gifts you a taper etched with a single loop. For your dreaming, she says, may it burn safely. You tuck it away, palm wax still warm, thinking of how fragile but persistent kindness can be, a spark hidden in gloom.
Crossing the threshold, you taste old hemp, sea salt, and the metallic tinge of bodies recently unchained. A vast hall opens before you, floorboards drumming underfoot, rafters black with soot from braziers banked against the cold. On raised platforms stand clerks in fur-lined caps, abacuses clicking as they jot columns of figures, weights, debts, dowries, blood fines. Each line corresponds to someone confined below or marched in from frontier wars. Overhead, wooden placards swing gently, painted with the device of whatever power currently claims a cut. Lion of the Crown, Lily of the Bishop, Serpent of the Merchant Guild. Each line corresponds to someone confined below or marched in from frontier wars.
You watch a captain of archers stride up with a folded charter, wax-sealed in blue. He places it on the scale beside a small pouch. A clerk slices open the seal, glances at 2 signatures, then pours silver groats atop the charter until the beam balances. Price for Sir Aemon, condemned but valuable, the clerk declares. Return him to the barracks by sext. With that, another man scrawls an order. Somewhere, a guard unlocks a cell, and a prisoner's life pivots back toward daylight. All in less than 90 seconds. It is impossible not to think of the hourglass you overturned below ground, and how much slower the sand seemed to fall when agony, not coin, measured time. To your left, an abbot hovers beside a wool-draped nun carrying a reliquary. They bargain over a mason held for sacrilege. The reliquary's gilt lid gleams whenever torchlight catches its facets. Relic of St. Kenelm's finger, the abbot insists, urging a discount. The clerk, unimpressed, lifts the lid and discovers only clean bone splinters. He shakes his head. Half value. Finger lacks first knuckle. The nun reddens. A cartographer behind you snorts with laughter. And in that instant, you grasp the grim humor of this bazaar. Everything, down to saintly knuckles, finds place on the balance. One clerk, perhaps kinder than the rest, keeps a second book hidden beneath his desk. When a price feels unjust, he quietly rounds a number down, absorbing the loss from petty cash. Over years, his book has grown fat with red ink tallies and marginalia, evidence that mercy can occupy ledgers too, if one knows where to hide the columns. He sees you studying him, winks, and flips the page. Beyond the ledgers, a semicircular dais rises. Here, prisoners who command no private ransom are offered to the highest civic or ecclesiastical bidder, their labor pledged in exchange for clemency. You arrive just as a bearded mercer steps forward to examine a young woman shackled at the ankles. She's been marked scribe, fluent Latin, some Greek, but her wrists bear the swollen cuts of the rack. The mercer asks that she read aloud from a parchment. Her voice trembles, yet remains clear, and a small ripple of admiration passes through the crowd. Bidding begins. Watch the faces around you. A baker bites his thumb, weighing whether a scholar might help him draft contracts. A magistrate hides behind his hood, determined to purchase silent servants who'll never betray a bribe. Even children peer between balusters, eyes bright with the day's grim pageantry. The gavel drops at 8 marks. The scribe's chains are removed, replaced with a velvet collar sewn with the mercer's crest. She will copy guild ledgers until her debt and her spine are deemed straight again. Whether that day ever arrives depends on margins no math can predict. Periodically, the authorities stage a spectaculum misericordia, a show of mercy designed to temper the market's brutality. They drag out a gaunt friar infamous for sedition, announce his sins with theatrical flourish, then proclaim royal pardon to popular applause. Yet you notice how the applauders are mostly guards and brokers. Townsfolk's cheers sound forced, palm slapping only because custom demands. Mercy itself has become currency, traded like witticisms at banquet tables. A tremor of drums signals midday. Porters wheel in jugs of watered wine. Clerks refresh quills. Condottieri display new lots captured at dawn. Transactions resume. You find yourself counting heartbeats, unable to shake the arithmetic you learned in the Bureau of Reversals. Upkeep, loyalty coefficient, risk index. Somewhere deep within, you vow never again to look at a balance sheet without hearing those clicking beads and feeling a chill behind your ribs. Step outside for a breath and you're engulfed by a lane whose walls lean so close overhead they nearly touch, forming a stone throat. Locals call it gallows whisper because sound travels here without echo. Words spoken at one end glide intact to the other. It serves the ransom trade as a black market exchange for gossip. Monks in patched robes swap names of prisoners whose families hoard jewels. Dockhands divulge which captains bribe customs. Courtiers peddle hints of future wars. Your guide pauses, listens. He identifies phrases darting past. Bishop's nephew, pneumonia, price dropping by vespers. Or gold shipment delayed, inflation risk, strike quick. Even wind seems to hush, so secrets slip more cleanly. You grasp that rumors here are worth coin, because coin itself governs whether a man spends Tuesday in chains or in cheery tavern. One rumor snags your ear. A foreign envoy has offered 300 florins and safe conduct to any clerk who forges release papers for 20 prisoners bound for the mines. 20 souls for the price of 2 war horses. No one acts yet. They weigh the bounty against the lash if caught. In this alley, morality feels like a feather tipped against anvils of consequence. Your guide scribbles the envoy's name in a notebook. Information wants a steward, he mutters. Whether he'll sell it, safeguard it, or act on it, you cannot know. If you, viewer, could wander gallows whisper for an hour, what secret would you seek first? Tell me below. Your comments nourish these night walks, and perhaps some hissed confession will spark our next tale. At the edge of the quay stands a long shed whose windows glow amber even on sunlit afternoons. Boards creak underfoot as you enter and discover rows of printing presses, each attended by apprentices damp with sweat and ink. They churn out documents granting safe passage, notarized pardons, even invitations to court banquets. Every seal uncanny in its precision. The Crown, of course, condemns such forgery, yet magistrates secretly commission duplicates in case originals vanish. Thus, crime and law share a desk, passing pens back and forth. A master forger in blue smock invites you closer. He demonstrates how he blends pigments for counterfeit wax, cinnabar from Spain, orpiment from Persia, beeswax from local hives. He lifts a cooling blob shaped into the king's own rose emblem and sighs. True art, he says, is that which might free a man at dawn or send him to the rope at dusk. His eyes betray exhaustion. Perhaps each letter he inks steals a breath from someone unseen. He leads you to a chest containing passes already dated tomorrow, next week, next month. They are for emergencies, he claims, though emergencies seem constant. One bears the name of the scribe you saw sold an hour earlier. You ask whether she knows. He shrugs. If her owner's heart softens, the pass awaits. If not, the river will carry it away. And indeed, beyond the press room, a sluice sluices crumpled parchments into current, symbols of hopes expired. You pocket a shred stamped with incomplete crest, souvenir or evidence, you can't decide. The shred smells of lampblack and honeyed wax, the scent of a future half-formed. Night again. On the riverbank, a circle of officials gather around a brazier. Whenever negotiations fail and a captive's family refuses payment, the clerk sets an effigy aflame. Threadbare tunic stuffed with straw, marked by the prisoner's name. As the scarecrow burns, its ashes swirl into darkness, signaling to higher authorities that the account is closed. No more food, no more bargaining. For onlookers, it doubles as warning and entertainment. Children watch, transfixed by sparks. You witness 3 effigies consigned to flame. The third carries a pilgrim's scallop shell. A woman beside you breathes, "He journeyed holy miles. See how little they weigh against debt." She drops her gaze, slips away. Perhaps she knew him. Perhaps everyone here recognizes someone. A trumpeter, not the silent kind used below, blasts a single mournful note after each burning. Sound bounces off water and back, echoing until it thins to silence. You feel the ground of your own convictions shifting. Justice, mercy, commerce, faith, each exposed as overlapping circles on one scorched parchment. Your last stop sits atop a river tower where scribes finalize ledgers before dawn. One hands you a quill. "Balance this," he challenges, gesturing to a slate. 200 prisoners, 93 ransomed, 47 dead, 20 escaped, the rest pending. Income tallied, expenses subtracted, but a blank line awaits moral cost. Numbers fail. The weight of that emptiness slams harder than any cell door. You set down the quill unsatisfied. He nods. Failure is universal, he implies. To banish the gloom, he shows you a cabinet of candles purchased from the dungeon artisan. the ones etched with loops of mercy. Each ledger clerk lights one when adding a name to the pending list, a private ritual acknowledging lives neither lost nor freed. Tonight, the cabinet is half empty. Take a moment, fellow traveler, and imagine standing beside that cabinet. Which looped candle would you ignite? Whose name would you hope it protects? Write it below. Let comments become candles in mightier cabinets, the digital kind our age commands. At last, dawn's first gold threads ripple across the river. Barges drift, gulls shriek, fishmongers set crates on stalls. Ordinary city life stirs, oblivious or willfully blind to all you have seen. Your guide escorts you to a footbridge, presses a token into your palm, a thin wooden disc stamped with the dungeon seal, good for one free entry at any future date. Some nightmares, he says, require repeats before lessons take. You shudder, unsure whether you'll ever return. But you pocket the token, because stories, like ledgers, remain open unless you mark them closed. And perhaps, years hence, curiosity or duty will drag you back to these corridors of ledgers and whispers. For now, share this chronicle. Like, subscribe, sound the bell so the next tale reaches you before the sand in our shared hourglass runs dry. In the comments, cast your vote. Should the hidden mercy clerk expand his red ink book or flee with forged papers? Your verdict could steer our next wandering. Until we descend again, may the candle maker's loops guard your sleep. May ledger lines spare your name, and may dawn, when it finds you, weigh less than ash.